So, Cas started as CEO of Business Unity South Africa in April 2020 after retiring as the MD of the Banking Association of South Africa, having spent 15 years there. He was instrumental in positioning the Banking Association as one of the leading business organizations in South Africa and positioning it as a credible voice for the banking industry. Cas obtained his BCom from the University College of Durban in 1971. He completed the Housing Finance course with the Wharton Real Estate Center at the University of Pennsylvania. He has also completed the Effective Directors Program with the Kagiso School of Leadership, and he has contributed to numerous articles and publications on housing, finance, civil society, local government, and the role of civic organizations in governance. Cas is still active in numerous business organizations and in civic life. He is the chairperson of the National Business Initiative, on the Council for Wits University, on the board of the Centre for Development and Enterprise, amongst others. Cas, we're thrilled to have you here today, even if it's virtually, and we look forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the introduction. And sorry I couldn't join you physically, but a couple of days ago I started getting throatache and a headache and so on, and that's how I found I had COVID in December, and I didn't want to take a chance, so I just thought that I'd do it virtually, and good to be with you. So I'm just going to very briefly talk to the impact of COVID and the future of business and the future of the way of working. In South Africa, we haven't had much work done on looking at how businesses have adjusted to COVID, because to a certain extent, we're still in the midst of COVID. We're still in the fifth wave. While most of the regulations are gone, we are still, according to the latest health regulations, expected to wear masks indoors, and there are still some minimal restrictions remaining. So work hasn't been done to look at how businesses have adjusted to this and whether they've actually changed the modes of working. Obviously, during COVID, there were significant changes in the way of working, and these would, we believe, carry forward going forward, and it would change the way we're working. But there has been work done internationally that gives us some pointers, and I think a major piece of work has been done by McKinsey. And I went through that in preparation for this input, and I think that they have some interesting pointers on where we would be going, and so I'm going to talk to what the McKinsey report says and use that to actually look at what the possibilities of the way the future of work will change in South Africa could be. So it's trite to say that there's a marked difference in the way of working. Even in South Africa, we saw working virtually during COVID, and now a number of sectors and number of businesses are still in hybrid mode. And McKinsey, certainly their research shows that the hybrid mode of working will be with us. It will be a reasonably permanent change in the way we do business. It's been shown, certainly in the short term, to be more productive, although it's had an impact on family life balance. But certainly virtual working with some physical presence is probably the way to go in future, and that's what the research seems to be saying. In work they've done between it's showing that between 20 to 25% of the workforce in advanced countries, economies, and 10% in emerging economies could work from home for between 3 to 5 days a week. And this is working from home, not just hybrid. A bigger percentage of the workforce would be working hybridly. So that's a significant shift in the way we're going to be working. I think that besides the fact that it's been shown to be more productive, I think that it's also created an environment where people, particularly upwardly mobile employees, have shown that if they are given the opportunity to manage their work, to be more flexible in the way they do their work, so that they can also, during the course of the day, take care of other issues that, let's say, a single mother might need to take care of also, that they can still remain productive, and they can also deal with issues and improve the quality of their lives as they remain productive. So that seems to be, at the very least, the hybrid mode of working appears to be a permanent feature. There will obviously also be a marked impact on office space, and we're seeing that here in South Africa. We're seeing in our negotiations with property owners and landlords that's becoming a feature, and how we negotiate that. And McKinsey, in speaking to about 278 executives in August 2020 already, said that they will reduce office space by 30%. So there's undoubtedly a move towards either hot desks type of work environment in many areas, or smaller offices, and this talks to the hybrid way of working, that you don't need the sort of office space you needed before, and this will have an impact on the commercial property space, and we're beginning to see that in South Africa as well. The pandemic has also accelerated automation and the move towards artificial intelligence in the economy. Again, McKinsey is interviewing about 800 senior executives in July 2020. 2/3 said they were stepping up investment in automation and artificial intelligence. And while sort of the global economy, not in an equitable way, because some were still lagging behind, but generally the global economy was moving towards a more digitalized form of economic activity. The pandemic obviously accelerated that, and has led to executives saying that they will now invest in AI and automation, because during the pandemic, people started actually utilizing different modes of working, different consumers started using different modes of interaction with businesses providing services and goods to them, and this will become the modus operandi going forward. So investment in automation and AI is definitely going up, will continue to go up, and will change the way in which consumers interact with people supplying them and servicing them. The pandemic also revealed vulnerabilities in the long and complicated supply chains of many companies, and in a way, what happened, given those supply chains, that if production shut down in a single, that production usually shut down when a single factory went dark. And what this has done is executives have responded to this by using AI and data analytics to learn more about and to audit and connect to the entire value chain. So the way we used to do business is that these complicated and long value chains, and very often executives not aware of what's happening further down in the value chain. And what COVID showed is that if something further down was affected by COVID and shut down. It actually shut down the entire production. And so executives are beginning to shorten those supply chains, are beginning to outsource more, and it will have an impact on the way things are going to be working. So those are some of the critical findings of the McKinsey report. I've also been involved in some work with the B20, which is the business equivalent of the G20. And I've been involved in that work because the International Organization of Employers have been involved in that work, and I sit on their board representing BUSA and the region as an employer body. And we've done some work on the impact of COVID and what we should be looking at going forward. And the B20 has looked at this more from a broader policy environment and the impact that COVID has had on more vulnerable sectors of society. The document is not complete yet. We in the sort of last draft, and then this will be presented to the G20 group of governments. But some of the critical issues that are being looked at there are that there's undoubtedly going to be an impact on labor markets and regulations as a result of COVID. The future of work means that labor markets and regulation must align to that future, and we need to promote more flexible and dynamic labor markets. And that obviously will be a critical issue here in South Africa, because as businesses adjust to COVID, as you have more hybrid ways of working, COVID has had a significant impact on lower paid workers, and McKinsey's report is showing that there's going to be upward mobility in the workforce, and that there's going to be movement of the workforce into higher areas of and more professional areas of work because of the fact that the economies are going to become more AI oriented and digitalized. In South Africa, we have a particular problem given our labor force and the lack of skills and so on. So that's something that we're going to have to grapple with here, and certainly as BUSA we're beginning to grapple with. One of the things that the B20 report is saying is that one of the challenges post-COVID for businesses would be to see how we interact with educational facilities and academic facilities to ensure that students come out of there ready for the new economy. But we also then have the challenge of a substantial pool of either unskilled or inappropriately skilled people. And the B20 document is beginning to say that we need to look at how businesses will become involved with government in reskilling people and also enabling some sort of lifelong learning opportunities so that people, as they are working, they learn and they can then progress. That document is also saying that it's not just COVID that has an impact on this, and this isn't just as a result of the impact of COVID, but climate change will also be a significant factor. And in South Africa, we'll be doing a lot of work on a just transition from fossil fuel-based energy to cleaner energy, which will also have an impact on the workforce. So I think both the impact of COVID and how we manage climate change and a move from fossil fuel-based to cleaner energy is going to present some challenges for businesses in this country. The B20 document is also looking at and noting the sort of devastation of the small medium enterprise sector in many countries. not just in emerging nations, but also in advanced economies. And the SME sector is often touted as the sector that has the best potential of creating particularly lower skilled jobs. And so the paper talks to a particular focus on development of SMEs, protection of those SMEs, sustainability of those SMEs, and how larger corporates can actually enable SMEs into their value chains so that we grow those. Then the B20 report also looks at the impact COVID has had on the informal economy, and in our country and in parts of the continent, this is a significant part of the economy. And the paper looks at mechanisms to bridge the informal economy into the formal economy, and also mechanisms to buttress shocks in the informal economy so that the informal economy can bear those shocks a bit more sustainably. And there's some thinking in the document about that. So I think between the sort of McKinsey and B20 work, McKinsey's report and research that they've done, and the B20 work we in the process of doing, it's quite clear that the world of work has changed. It's quite clear that the economy is going to be more digitalized. It's quite clear that at the very least a hybrid way of working will take root. And the McKinsey report also shows that younger people, the younger people in the workforce, the more educated part of the workforce, professionals in the workforce, as a result of COVID and how work has unfolded in COVID, to a certain extent going to demand a different way of working. The McKinsey report also demonstrates that in places like the US and elsewhere, while residential accommodation in cities is going, and demand for residential accommodation in cities is going down, demand for residential accommodation in suburbs is going up, which is beginning to show that people feel that they can move to suburbs and work from there electronically, virtually, and they don't need to be traveling to offices or living in the city to be working in offices. So those are all, I think, critical changes and critical signs that the world of work is going to change significantly as a result of COVID. And in the B20 document, I think that we do need to, particularly in the South African context, I believe, look at the impact that COVID has had on more vulnerable parts of society, because that formed a significant part of our society. And for businesses to be sustainable and for the economy to grow, as we've been trying to work hard at it, we have to address the impact of COVID on those sectors of society. And I think business needs to become involved in that. McKinsey, then let me look at a little bit of the health sector and what McKinsey in particular is saying about that. Again, I sort of I tried to contact people in the health sector in South Africa and didn't get too much information on real sort of action in responding to COVID and changing the way they're working, with the exception of what's already happened, the virtual way of working and the hybrid and so on. But I think we haven't started looking yet at how institutionally and structurally businesses in South Africa might need to change to actually respond to the changes of work, of the way of work that COVID has brought about. But some of the work that McKinsey has done. So one of the things they did is looked at or developed what they call physical proximity scores. And that's where those sectors of the economy that actually need physical presence, given the nature of their work. And obviously, healthcare was amongst the highest scores, needing that physical proximity and interaction. And as a result of that, McKinsey is saying that this sector will actually see some increase in employment as people become more health conscious after the pandemic. And they have figures for parts of Europe and the US, and sort of increases in employment of between 1.3 and 2.4% across those countries. There are signs of this in the health aid sector, in technicians and health professionals. But on the other side of the scale, in some healthcare facilities, there are also clear signs that telemedicine will increase. And just as an example, McKinsey quotes the CEO of the Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. And there, in all of 2019, they had 2,000 telehealth visits. In 2020, they had 5,000 a week. And the CEO there is of the view that telehealth will account for about 30% of all healthcare in future. So in the healthcare sector, there seems to be a sort of mixed response to this. So according to McKinsey, healthcare will attract additional people, but in the professional category, obviously. But in healthcare, in many healthcare facilities, they are beginning to see a move from physical to telemedical sort of services, and this will obviously need a different type of workforce, a different type of interaction, and we'll have to wait and see how the healthcare sector in this country responds to that. And you might have some experience of that already. Then just to talk a little bit about, a bit more broadly about what certainly we believe COVID means for business. And I think businesses need to reimagine, in my view, how work is done and increase their reskilling efforts, particularly in South Africa, I think. The pandemic does create opportunities for companies to reconfigure operations and to transform them in many ways. And the critical question we need to ask is, how do we build a future that delivers growth and sustainability and inclusion? In the BUSA and paper that we did through Business for South Africa in July or so 2020, just after COVID hit, the document we did on a post-COVID economic growth strategy. Up to now, I think the only well-researched and data-driven document on economic growth that we've got in the country. We were quite clear that it's not just rebuilding the economy post-COVID, it's reconfiguring the economy post-COVID. And that we definitely need to ensure a more sustainable and inclusive economy. And so I think that in South Africa, we're going to have to put our heads together. One, to see how we manage the change in work patterns and the change in the mode of work as a result of COVID. But I think we're also going to have to see how we reconfigure this economy so that those that have been most severely affected by COVID, both in the workforce and in society, are brought along in the reconfiguration of that economy and the way we grow the economy. Otherwise, we're not going to be building a sustainable economy over the long term, and I don't think that's in the interests of business. So I think that in South Africa we have particular challenges. We all agree that COVID has, to a certain extent, made more stark some of the challenges we have in our socio-economy and has exacerbated some of the inequalities. And as business, as we start rebuilding and as we start looking at how we reconfigure this economy, we have to take that into account. So those are some of the sort of indications coming from some work that's been done. Very little work in South Africa, unfortunately, but some work that's been done internationally, and some work that we're doing to give some input into the G20 group of countries to see how business can work with governments to actually address the impacts of COVID. And that's, I think, what the last question I raised, the question of growth, sustainability, and inclusivity, is going to be the acid test of how we come out of COVID and how we rebuild. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Cas. Appreciate that. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Caroline, how do we manage that? Are we going to, we have a mic. Are there any questions for Cas? Cas, if you can't hear the question, I'll repeat it, but we'll try.
Thank you.
Hi, Cas, can you hear me?
Cas, can you hear Neil? Let's try again.
I could hear, yeah.
Hi, Cas, thank you very much for an interesting topic, and hope you feel better post this and getting some rest. I've got 3 comments, possibly questions. Hopefully you can answer some of them, or we can address them a bit later. The first is obviously the challenge of the manual workforce in the medical device sector, when technology is leading in some aspects of the business. And that manual aspect, I would imagine would remain in the future. The second is, did McKinsey and them consider the metaverse along with working from home and hybrids, and the risk or the complementary aspect of the metaverse? And I'm sure considering also the impact of mental health, which is a very hot topic at the moment. And the third is just a comment. I think most of us feel that SA healthcare in many aspects is battling to crawl, yet the future is requiring autopilot driving.
Yeah. Okay, do you want to take a couple of questions, or do you want me to respond to each one?
Let's take a few. We have another one from Marlon Cas.
Hi, Cas, thanks for your enlightening talk. I just wanted to ask whether the McKinsey report showed government and private sector coming a bit closer, because historically there's this mistrust between those two entities, and whether the impact of COVID has brought two closer together to form some kind of partnerships or PPPs in order to help go back these economies. Is there anything in the report that's
Any more questions? Cas, I have one, if I may.
Sure.
You spoke about the need for business to engage the academic institutions. And I think it's very obvious that in South Africa, we are going to struggle, in terms of our large unskilled labor force. And that's going to put us on the back seat when it comes to competing with other countries. Do you have any thoughts on how that should be structured? There are initiatives such as the YES program that businesses can support to help build those skills. But just your thoughts on maybe how we can work together with the academic institutions and government.
Okay. So can I take those?
Go ahead.
Just on the McKinsey report and whether they've looked at mental health and so on, I think they have, and I didn't go into that in detail. I can certainly come back to you on that, and in fact, I can send you just to access the McKinsey report, but I think it makes very good reading. So they do talk about the impact of the hybrid ways of working in some instances on people's mental health, on the ability or the difficulties in managing and balancing family and work because you're in front of the computer virtually all day. And they do look at that, and I can come back to you on exactly what they say about that. I think the issue about the medical fraternity having a manual workforce and then having to also respond to COVID, given the changes in the way we're working. And I think that's the challenge we have on reskilling and reconfiguring our workforce to actually be ready and be able to participate in a different way of working. Now, in South Africa, we obviously, because of firstly, the relationship between business and labor, and secondly, because of the labor regulation, that makes it extremely difficult. Because there's absolutely no doubt that there's going to be winners and losers in this. We can do our best to cushion the losers, and we need to do that. But for a period of time, there will be winners and losers in that, and we have to then work through how we take the losers and reskill them and look at different areas of work that they can participate in. But this is something that we're going to have to work with government and labor on. We're certainly beginning to do that, but we haven't made enough progress on that. That then takes me into the sort of government and private sector relationships and so on. COVID had, when COVID hit, and we then started getting quite a lot of queries and calls, not just from BUSA members, but from business generally. That's when we decided to establish Business for South Africa as a business platform, not as another organization, as a business platform, so that we could encapsulate in there all of business, not just BUSA members. And the B4SA experience has given us some sort of a platform to see if we can work closer with government and other social partners. So, we worked with social partners at NEDLAC in looking at the impact of COVID, in working with government to help them manage the distribution of the tours, to help them manage how public transport should be handled, to help them looking at communication, looking at behavioral change issues and so on. And we did all of that at NEDLAC with social partners, including labor and government. We also then pulled in, at the height of COVID, we had about 400 professionals in health, in communications, in the legal fraternity and elsewhere, in economics, working pro bono to help us support government in managing COVID and then to putting into place our economic recovery strategy and so on. Last year, we had about 50 people working pro bono, supporting government in the vaccine rollout. And I shudder to think what would have happened if business wasn't supporting government in the vaccine rollout. So I think that has created a basis for involving business, certainly, in some of these issues, but also a basis for some sort of partnership with government in addressing some of the bigger challenges we have. But it's not easy. I mean, currently we met the president on the 28th of January and agreed on a series of bilaterals between business and government to address 6 critical issues in the country. And these are the normal ones: infrastructure, growth and investment, crime and law and order, energy, other network services like water and so on. And then to look at, and this comes to Caroline, your question just now as well, to look at as a separate work stream for us as business to see what we can do without really needing government's help too much. And even though the president agreed to this, we're battling to get this bilateral going. The president then announces a multilateral forum in his SONA speech and so on, but we're quite clear that we're not going to get involved in multilaterals, and we want to have bilaterals with them because that's the only way we're going to make progress. And we're using the B4 as a platform again to do this, and a number of business people have put their hands up already to say they'll come to the party provided we have bilaterals with government. So we've got a 3-year side going at the moment. Myself, Martin Kingston, and Adrian Gore on the business side, and Ministers of Labour, Employment, Labour, Trade and Industry, and Finance on the government side, where we're trying to convince them to commit to a series of bilaterals. And hopefully we can, but we can then develop a program and have a project management approach towards getting some stuff done. But, you know, it's obviously critical that we do work together, but I think we're going to get to a time soon, if we can't get these bilaterals going, to take a few steps back and see just how we relate to government if there's no commitment on the other side. So it's tough, but we're working away at it. On academic institutions, one of the things that we're also looking at Busa and Adrian Gore is quite passionate about as the deputy chair, is to say, surely there's stuff we can do that we don't really need government for. And one of those things that we're looking at is whether we identified 5-6 top universities in the country and start working with them to see how we can give input and support them and ensure that their curricula and what they're doing is actually fit for the new economy, and how we can ensure that we work together to churn out the sorts of capacity that the new economy will need. We're talking to University South Africa about this at the moment, and hopefully we can make progress with some of the top universities in that, and that's how we want to structure this, to have a structured relationship with them, to work together to understand exactly what sort of skills and capacity is needed, and then to see how business can actually give the necessary inputs and capacity into universities to enable that to happen. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Cas. Any last minute questions? No? Okay, that leaves me to say thank you very much, Cas, for spending this time with us. I think it was very enlightening. I think the work that BUSA is doing, the work that B4SA has done and is hoping to continue to do, has been instrumental in helping business, but also our country get through this really, really challenging time and times ahead of us. So thank you again. And SAMED is a member of BUSA. We've seen the value and just wish you well.
Thank you very much, and thanks for allowing me this opportunity. Cheers. All the best.